Welcome to Echoes from the Heart, the weekly homily podcast from Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish in Wayne, New Jersey. Each episode offers a moment of reflection, a word of hope, and a chance to let the gospel speak to your life. Thank you for praying with us today.
Someone once told Sir Alexander Fleming that if he had worked in the kind of perfectly sterile, beautifully equipped labs we have today, he might have discovered even more. Fleming is said to have smiled and replied, "That may be true, but then I would never have discovered penicillin." That's a striking answer. It goes against the way we usually think. We assume the best things happen in the best conditions. That clarity comes when life is organized, when the road is smooth, when everything is finally under control. But Fleming's reply says something different. Sometimes what seems inconvenient, unfinished, even frustrating, becomes part of the discovery itself. And in much the same way, that's exactly what the gospel shows us today. The disciples on the road to Emmaus are not having a good day. They're not walking through a peaceful, uplifting moment. They're leaving Jerusalem with heavy hearts. Their hopes have been shaken. They're trying to make sense of everything. What happened to Jesus? What it means now? Where they go from here? It's not a strong moment of faith. It's a moment of confusion. And yet, it's precisely there, on that road, that the risen Lord draws near. That tells us something important. Jesus doesn't wait until they're calm, confident, and ready. He meets them while they're still disappointed. He joins them while they're still trying to understand. Grace begins not after the struggle, but within it. That's why this gospel feels so close to real life. Most people don't wrestle with faith in abstract philosophical ways. They wrestle with it in the middle of actual things: grief, family worries, unanswered prayers, responsibilities that feel heavy, disappointments that just won't lift. And very often people think, once things settle down, then I'll pray better, trust more deeply, see God more clearly. But Emmaus shows us that the Lord often meets us before life makes sense, not after. The disciples say something deeply human in this story. They say, "We were hoping." Just those two words, and in them you can hear everything they're carrying. We were hoping He would redeem Israel. We were hoping the story would go another way. We were hoping the one we trusted wouldn't end on a cross. That sentence still lives in people's hearts today. We were hoping the diagnosis would be different. We were hoping the marriage would heal. We were hoping this burden would have passed by now. We were hoping God would answer another way. The sadness of this gospel isn't only that Jesus died, it's that their hopes seem to have died with Him. And that's exactly why this encounter is so powerful. Jesus doesn't open by correcting them harshly. He enters their conversation. He listens. He lets them speak. Then slowly, He begins to lead them from confusion toward understanding. And what does He do first? He opens the scriptures. He helps them see that the cross wasn't the collapse of God's plan, it was part of its fulfillment. That matters because we often want God to remove every hard thing immediately, but He sometimes begins by giving us light to see it differently. The suffering may still be there, the questions may not vanish in a moment, but when Christ opens the Word, He shows us that what seemed meaningless is not meaningless at all. This is one of the most important lessons for the spiritual life. We judge too quickly. If life feels easy, we assume God is near. If life is hard, we assume He's far away. If prayer feels warm, we think we're growing. If prayer feels dry, we think we're failing. But the gospel asks us to be more patient, more trusting. God can be very near in a season that feels unclear. The risen Christ can be walking right beside us even when our eyes are slow to recognize Him. That's really the heart of Emmaus. Jesus was present before they knew He was present. He was already speaking, already guiding, already drawing them forward. Later they would say, "Were not our hearts burning within us?" Grace was already at work before they could explain it, and that's true for us as well. Sometimes only later do we realize that the Lord was with us all along. At the time, all we could see was the disappointment. Later we begin to understand that He was carrying us, teaching us, staying closer than we knew. Then comes that simple, beautiful prayer, "Stay with us." They still don't fully understand, but they know one thing. They don't want him to leave. That's already real faith. Sometimes prayer doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes it's just this: stay with me, Lord. Stay with me in this confusion. Stay with me in this grief. Stay with me in this burden. Stay with me when I don't see clearly. And the Lord answers that prayer. He goes inside with them. He takes bread, blesses it, breaks it, gives it to them. And their eyes are opened. The church has always heard something deeply Eucharistic in that moment. On the road, Jesus opens the Scriptures. At the table, he is recognized in the breaking of the bread. Word and Eucharist, teaching and presence. That is still how he meets us. He speaks and he stays. He opens the Word and he gives himself in the Eucharist. That's why Sunday Mass matters so much. We don't come because every week we feel strong and focused and ready. We come because we need the risen Lord to meet us again. We need him to speak into our confusion. We need him to feed us with his presence. We need our eyes opened again. And notice what happens next. Once the disciples recognize him, they get up and go back to Jerusalem. Earlier they were walking away, tired, discouraged, done. Now they return with new hearts. The road hasn't changed, but they have. That is one of the clearest signs of Easter. An encounter with the risen Christ may not immediately change every external situation, but it changes the person who has encountered him, so this gospel becomes very practical. The question isn't whether we're walking a perfect road. We're not. The question is whether we're willing to let the risen Lord meet us on the road we're actually walking, with its uncertainty, its fatigue, its disappointments, and unresolved questions. Which brings us back to Fleming. His point wasn't that disorder is good in itself. It was that the breakthrough came through circumstances that didn't look ideal. In much the same way, God can work in the unfinished places of life. The disciples meet Jesus not after the struggle, but in the middle of it, not when everything makes sense, but while they're still trying to understand. That's hopeful news. Because most of life is lived there. We spend much of our time on the road, in the middle of things, carrying hopes and fears, limitations and responsibilities. And the Easter Gospel tells us that none of that places us beyond the reach of Christ. The risen Lord still comes near. He still opens the Scriptures. He still gives himself in the breaking of the bread. So perhaps the grace of this Sunday is not to ask for a perfect road, but to ask for open eyes. Lord, help me recognize you where I'm already walking. Help me trust that even here in what feels unfinished, you are present. And maybe that's the prayer we carry into this week. Stay with us, Lord. Stay with us on the difficult road until our hearts begin to burn again and our eyes begin to open. And then give us the courage to rise and live as people who know that you are truly alive.
Thank you for listening to Echoes from the Heart. If this reflection blessed you, consider sharing it with someone who might need a word of hope today. For Mass times, parish events, and upcoming programs, visit ihmwaynenj.org. God bless you, and may your week be filled with peace and grace.